The wind cut through thistle rock like a rusted blade, carrying ice crystals that stung exposed skin and rattled the loose boards of abandoned storefronts. December 1878 had arrived with a vengeance, turning the Wyoming Territory into a frozen wasteland where even the hardiest souls huddled close to their fires. Wade Carver pulled his coat collar higher against his weathered neck, guiding his mare down the empty main street. 36 winters had carved lines around his eyes, each one a testament to solitary years spent on the high plains. His hands, wrapped in worn leather gloves, held the reins with the easy confidence of a man who'd spent more time with horses than people. The town lay quiet as a graveyard. Windows shuttered against the cold revealed only thin strips of lamplight. No children played in the streets. No women gossiped by the well. Even the dogs had found somewhere warmer to be. Wade preferred it this way. Fewer eyes meant fewer questions. Fewer questions meant he could get his supplies and return to his cabin before the next storm rolled in from the mountains. His boots echoed hollow on the boardwalk as he tied his mare to the hitching post outside Morrison's general store. The shopping list in his mind was simple ammunition for his Winchester, tobacco for the long evenings, and canvas to repair his saddle. Nothing more, nothing less. He'd learned years ago that wanting more than the essentials only led to disappointment. Inside the store, old Morrison barely glanced up from his ledger. "Carver," he acknowledged with a curt nod. "No good morning or how've you been?" Just recognition and nothing more. That suited Wade fine. He gathered his supplies methodically, counting out exact change from the leather pouch in his coat. Morrison wrapped everything in brown paper without a word. Their transaction as brief and impersonal as the winter daylight. Back outside, Wade secured the bundle to his saddlebags. The cold had intensified, bringing with it the metallic smell of coming snow. He should leave now, beat the weather back to his cabin, but his mare needed new shoes, and Jed Turner at the blacksmith shop was the only man in 3 counties who knew how to shoe a horse proper. Wade led his mare down the alley between the general store and Paulson's bakery. The narrow passage offered some protection from the wind, though it funneled the cold into a bitter stream. He was halfway through when movement caught his eye. Behind Paulson's, near the waste bins where they threw day-old bread, a figure crouched in the shadows. At first, Wade thought it might be a dog or perhaps a vagrant looking for scraps. But as his eyes adjusted to the dim light, he saw her clearly. A young woman in what had once been a wedding dress, now torn and muddied beyond recognition. The white fabric, stained brown and gray, hung loose on her thin frame. Her dark hair, which might have been pinned up fancy once, fell in tangled strands around her face. She didn't notice him, too focused on pulling a moldy crust from beneath some rotted vegetables. Wade had seen desperate people before. The frontier was full of them, failed prospectors, abandoned wives, orphaned children. He'd learned to look away, to mind his own business. Getting involved only brought trouble. But something in the way she moved, careful and quiet like a wounded animal, made him pause. Her hands shook as she brushed dirt from the bread. When she brought it to her mouth, she closed her eyes as if it were the finest meal she'd ever tasted. The back door of the bakery flew open with a bang. Paulson himself emerged, flour still dusting his apron, face red with anger. "Get away from there, you thieving runaway!" He grabbed a broom, waving it like a weapon. "I told you yesterday, we don't feed beggars and thieves." The woman scrambled back, clutching the bread crust to her chest. "Please, I wasn't—" "Save your lies for someone who cares." Paulson advanced, bringing the broom down hard. It missed her by inches, striking the frozen ground with a crack. "Sheriff's been asking about a runaway bride from back east. Bet there's good money for whoever turns you in." She tried to stand, but slipped on the ice, landing hard on her knees. The bread crust fell from her hands, rolling into a puddle of frozen slush. Paulson raised the broom again. "That's enough." Wade's voice cut through the alley like a whip crack. He hadn't meant to speak, but the words came anyway. Paulson turned, broom still raised, squinting in the dim light. "This ain't your concern. Carver, girl's been stealing from my bins for 3 days now." "Doesn't look like stealing to me." Wade stepped forward, positioning himself between Paulson and the woman. "Man, throw something away. It's not his anymore." "She's scaring off customers, lurking around like some ghost." Paulson's grip on the broom tightened. "Bad for business." Wade reached into his coat, pulling out a silver dollar. "This cover what she's taken?" Paulson's eyes fixed on the coin. $1 was 2 days' worth of bread sales. His anger wavered, replaced by greed. "Well now, I suppose—" "Good." Wade flipped the coin. Paulson caught it, testing it with his teeth. "Now get inside before you freeze something important off." The baker muttered something about crazy hermits and runaway women, but retreated into his shop, slamming the door behind him. Wade waited until he heard the lock turn before looking down at the woman. She hadn't moved, still kneeling in the slush, staring at the spot where the bread had fallen. Up close, he could see she wasn't as young as he'd thought, maybe 25 or 30. Her face bore the hollow look of someone who'd gone too many days without proper food. But her eyes, when she finally looked up at him, held a fierce dignity. "I can pay you back," she whispered, though they both knew it was a lie. Wade walked to the bakery's front entrance, leaving her in the alley. Through the window, he could see Paulson counting his morning's earnings. Wade knocked, waiting until the baker opened the door a crack. "What now?" "Carver. 2 loaves, fresh ones." Paulson's expression soured. "That dollar was for 2 loaves," Wade repeated, adding another 50 cents to sweeten the deal. "And you forget you ever saw her." The baker disappeared inside, returning with 2 warm loaves wrapped in clean cloth. Wade took them without thanks, turning back to the alley. She was still there, though she'd pulled herself up to lean against the wall. Her dress, he noticed now, had once been quite fine silk or something like it, with tiny pearls sewn into the bodice. Most were missing now, leaving tiny holes like stars in a tattered sky. Wade held out the bread. She stared at it like it might disappear, then at him with suspicion sharp as winter wind. "Take it," he said simply. Her hands trembled as she reached out. The moment her fingers touched the warm cloth, something in her face crumbled. Not quite tears, she seemed past that, but a loosening of the rigid control that had kept her upright. "I'm sorry," she whispered, clutching the bread against her chest. "Don't apologize for being hungry," Wade said. "It's not a sin." She took a small bite, closing her eyes as the warmth spread through her. Wade turned to leave, but her voice stopped him. "Margot." The word came out rough, like she hadn't spoken in days. "My name is Margot Quinn." Wade nodded, but didn't offer his own name. Names created connections, and connections led to complications he couldn't afford. He'd already done more than he should. "There's a church 2 streets over," he said instead. "Minister's wife sometimes takes in strays." "I can't." The words came quick, panicked. "They'll ask questions. Send word back home. I can't go back. I can't." Wade had heard that tone before, in wounded animals and broken people. The sound of something that would rather die than return to whatever cage it had escaped. He should walk away now, get his mare shod and head home before the storm hit. This wasn't his problem. But he found himself studying her again, the way she held herself despite everything, back straight even as she shivered. The careful way she ate, taking small bites to make it last. The wedding dress that told a story he didn't need to hear to understand. "Wait here," he said finally. At Turner's blacksmith shop, Wade found Jed working on a wagon wheel, sparks flying from his hammer strikes. The big man looked up as Wade entered, wiping sweat from his brow despite the cold. "Carver, heard you were in town." Jed gestured to the mare. "She throwing shoes again?" "Right rear's loose." Wade watched Jed work, efficient and careful. "You hear anything about a runaway from back east?" Jed's hammer paused mid-strike. "Sheriff's been asking around. Some banker's daughter, they say, ran off on her wedding day with half the family valuables." He resumed hammering. "Though between you and me, stories like that usually got more fiction than fact." "Usually do," Wade agreed. "Why you asking? You never cared about town gossip before." "Just curious." Wade counted out payment for the shoeing. "Storm coming in. Best to know what kind of trouble might blow in with it." Jed gave him a long look, but said nothing more. Wade appreciated that about the blacksmith. He knew when not to push. By the time Wade returned to the alley, the snow had started falling in thick, heavy flakes. Margot was where he'd left her, the bread nearly gone, held close like a treasure. She looked up at his approach, something between fear and hope in her eyes. Wade untied the wool blanket from his saddle, shaking it out before draping it around her shoulders. She clutched it tight, the first real warmth she'd felt in days. "I'll be back after dark," he said. "Stay out of sight till then." "Why?" The question held no suspicion now, only bewilderment. "Why would you—" "Because I know what it's like." Wade cut her off. "To be so far from home you can't remember why you left, only that you can't go back." He mounted his mare and rode out of town without looking back, though he could feel her watching until the snow swallowed the distance between them. The storm was coming in fast now, and he had preparations to make. As the town disappeared behind him, Wade tried to convince himself he was just being practical. The woman would freeze to death in this weather, and finding a corpse come spring would bring questions and investigators. Better to help her move on, find somewhere else to disappear. But deep down, in parts of himself he'd thought frozen solid. Wade knew the truth. Something in her eyes reminded him of his own reflection in those first years after the war, when he'd been running from memories that wouldn't stay buried. Something in her careful dignity, despite the desperate circumstances, spoke to him in a language he'd almost forgotten. The mare picked her way through the deepening snow. Sure-footed despite the weather, Wade pulled his hat lower and urged her on. He had supplies to gather and plans to make. After all, saving someone was more complicated than just offering bread. It meant making choices that would ripple out like stones in still water, changing things in ways you couldn't predict. It meant taking responsibility for another life when he'd spent years barely managing his own. But sometimes, Wade thought as the cabin came into view through the swirling snow, sometimes the only real sin was walking away when you could have stayed. And he'd done enough walking away to last a lifetime. The snow had turned Thistle Rock into a ghost town by the time Wade returned. Streets that had been merely empty before now lay buried under a thick white blanket, muffling even the sound of his mare's hooves. The few lit windows he'd seen earlier had gone dark, townsfolk hunkering down to wait out the storm. Wade guided his horse through the alley, squinting through the swirling flakes. For a moment, he thought she'd moved on, or been driven off. But then he saw her. Margot had pressed herself into a small alcove where the bakery wall met the adjacent building. The blanket he'd given her pulled tight around her shoulders. Snow had gathered on the wool, making her look like some winter spirit materializing from the storm. She looked up at his approach, and Wade saw she'd been crying. The tears had left clean tracks through the dirt on her face, but her eyes held that same fierce dignity he'd noticed before. "Thought you might not come back," she said, voice barely audible above the wind. Wade dismounted, pulling a bundle from his saddlebags. "Said I would." Inside the bundle, another blanket, thick wool socks, a pair of men's gloves too large for her hands but better than nothing, hard biscuits that would keep, dried beef, and a canteen of water. Practical things, survival things. She stared at the items like they were treasures from a king's vault. "I don't understand. You don't know me. Don't know what I've done." "Don't need to." Wade helped her to her feet, noting how she swayed slightly. 3 days of near starvation would do that. "Can you ride?"
Yes, I could before."
She glanced at his mare, then back at him.
"Where would we go?"
There's an old trapper's shelter about 5 miles north. Not much, but it's got walls and a roof. Better than freezing here. She pulled the blanket tighter, looking back toward the main street.
They're looking for me. That baker, he knows. And the sheriff's been asking questions. There's a reward.
I know. Then why? Because I've got eyes, Wade interrupted. I can see when someone's running from something that'll hurt them worse than any storm. He adjusted his hat against the snow. Now, you coming or not? Ooh. For a long moment, she stood there in the swirling snow, wedding dress soaked through despite the blanket, face pale as porcelain. Wade could see her weighing her options. Trust a stranger or face another night in the cold. Maybe her last night.
If you're planning to collect that reward,
she said finally,
you could do it just as easy here as anywhere.
If I wanted reward money, you'd already be in the sheriff's office. Wade held out his hand. Decision's yours, but make it quick. This storm's getting worse. She looked at his extended hand, weathered, scarred, steady, then placed her own in it. Her fingers were like ice through the thin gloves he'd given her. Wade helped her onto the mare, noting how she moved with practiced ease despite her condition. Whoever she'd been before, she'd known horses. He swung up behind her, reaching around to take the reins. Hold on, he said. Trail gets rough outside town. She leaned back against him slightly, whether from exhaustion or trust he couldn't say. Wade clicked his tongue, and the mare moved forward into the storm. They rode in silence through the empty streets, past darkened shops and houses sealed tight against the weather, at the town's edge. Wade felt her tense. Wait, her voice was urgent. Someone's coming. Wade heard it too, horses approaching through the snow. He guided the mare behind the abandoned freight office, dismounting quickly and holding the horse's muzzle to keep her quiet. Through the gaps in the boarding, he could see 3 riders materializing from the white. Sheriff Tom Brennan rode in front, his deputy Jake Morris beside him. The third man Wade didn't recognize, city clothes visible even under his heavy coat, sitting his horse like someone more used to carriages.
Said she was seen near the bakery this morning,
the stranger was saying, his accent marking him as Eastern educated. Wearing the wedding dress still, the fool girl. We've searched every building in town. Mr. Hartley. Brennan replied, sounding tired. If she's here, she's well hidden. She's here, Hartley insisted. Where else would she go? She has no money, no friends, no family west of Missouri. Maybe she moved on, Deputy Morris suggested. Caught a freight wagon, headed to Denver or E. She wouldn't dare. Hartley cut him off. She knows what's waiting if we catch her. Theft of family property, breach of contract, scandal that'll ruin her for life. No, she's hiding somewhere, thinking she can wait us out. They passed close enough that Wade could see Hartley's face clearly. Mid-40s, well-fed, with the soft look of a man who'd never missed a meal or slept rough. His eyes, though, were hard as flint. Double the reward, Hartley said suddenly. $500 for whoever brings her to me. Alive and unmarked, she's no good to anyone damaged. That's a lot of money, Brennan observed carefully. The jewelry she stole is worth 10 times that. Family heirlooms, her grandmother's pearls, a ruby ring that's been in my family for generations. Hartley's voice grew harder. The ungrateful little witch took everything she could carry and ran. Behind Wade, pressed against the wall, Margot had gone rigid. He could feel her trembling, though whether from cold or fear he couldn't tell. We'll keep looking, Brennan promised. Check the ranches tomorrow, see if anyone's taken in strays. Find her, Hartley commanded. I didn't come all this way to return empty-handed. The family's reputation depends on it. The riders moved on, their voices fading into the storm. Wade waited until he couldn't hear them anymore before leading the mare back out. Get down, he said quietly. Margot slid off the horse, stumbling slightly. Wade caught her arm, steadying her.
He's lying,
she whispered, urgent now.
I didn't steal anything. The pearls were my grandmother's, given to me. The ring was my mother's. He's lying."
"I know." She stared at him.
"How could you know?"
"Because I've met enough liars to recognize one." Wade pulled items from his saddlebags, a moth-eaten coat, a battered hat.
"Put these on. Cover that dress."
She didn't argue, pulling the coat on over the blanket. It swallowed her small frame, but with the hat pulled low, she looked less like a runaway bride and more like a trailhand's son. "Now what?" she asked.
"Now we take a different route."
Wade helped her back onto the mare.
"That shelter's no good. They'll check it tomorrow. But I know somewhere else. Somewhere they won't think to look."
They rode out of town by a different path, following the creek bed where the snow hadn't drifted as deep. The storm wrapped around them like a living thing, hiding their tracks almost as soon as they made them. An hour out, Wade felt her starting to slump against him. The little food she'd eaten wasn't enough to sustain her through this cold, this exertion.
"Stay awake,"
he said, shaking her slightly.
"Can't have you falling off." "I'm trying."
Her voice was fading.
"Tell me something, anything, just keep talking."
Wade wasn't a talking man. Years of solitude had made words feel foreign in his mouth, but he could feel her shivering, feel her fighting to stay conscious. "Used to know a woman like you," he said, surprising himself.
"Back in Kansas, after the war, ran from an arranged marriage, hid out in a church for 3 days. Preacher's wife finally convinced her to go back, said it was her duty."
"What happened to her?"
"Found her in the river 2 months later, pockets full of stones."
Margot was quiet for a moment.
Then, "I won't go back. I'll die first."
"I know," Wade said.
"That's why we're riding through a blizzard instead of sitting by a warm fire."
She laughed, a small, broken sound, but a laugh nonetheless.
"You're not what I expected."
"What'd you expect?" "I don't know. When you gave me that bread, bought it fresh when you could have just walked away. People don't do that, not without wanting something. Maybe I wanted to sleep sound, knowing I didn't let someone starve in an alley."
"Is that all?"
Wade considered the question as they rode through the white darkness.
Why had he helped her?
He'd seen plenty of desperate people over the years, had learned to harden his heart against their need. But something about her, the dignity in her desperation, the way she'd apologized for being hungry, had cracked through his carefully built walls. "My sister," he said finally, words coming hard.
"She was about your age when she married a man my father chose. Good match, everyone said. Prosperous farmer, church-going, respected."
He felt Margot listening, her body less rigid against his.
"Took 2 years before she finally wrote me, told me what he was really like. By then I was in the territories, too far to help. Got word she died in childbirth. But I knew better. Some deaths are escapes."
They rode in silence after that, each lost in their own ghosts. The cabin, when it finally appeared through the snow, looked like salvation, small and weathered, built into a hillside where the wind couldn't reach, with a stone chimney promising warmth. Wade helped Margot down, her legs barely holding her. He half carried her to the door, kicked it open, and got her inside. The cabin was sparse, a cot, a table, 2 chairs, a small stove, but it was dry and would warm quickly. "Sit," he ordered, guiding her to a chair. "I'll get a fire going." His hands worked automatically, kindling, logs, the careful construction of heat. Behind him, he heard her moving, the rustle of wet fabric.
"I need to get out of this dress,"
she said, voice tight with embarrassment.
"It's soaked through."
Wade kept his back turned, focusing on the fire.
"There's a trunk in the corner. Should be some clothes. They'll be too big, but they're dry."
He heard her moving to the trunk, the creak of its hinges, a soft gasp.
"These are women's clothes."
Wade's hand stilled on the firewood. He hadn't opened that trunk in 3 years.
"They were my wife's."
Silence stretched between them,
broken only by the crackling of the growing fire. "Where is she?" Margot asked softly. "Gone. Fever took her." Winter of 75. Wade stood, still not turning around. "I'll wait outside while you change." "In the storm." "I've weathered worse." He moved toward the door, but her voice stopped him. "Wade, you never told me your name, but I heard the sheriff say it. Please don't go. I'm scared. Not of you, of being alone, of waking up and finding this was a dream and I'm still in that alley." Wade stood at the door, hand on the latch. In 3 years of solitude, no one had asked him to stay. He'd built his life around leaving, around being left. "I'll sit by the door," he said finally. "Face away. You change. Then tell me when you're decent." He settled on the floor by the entrance, back to the room, listening to the rustle of fabric, the soft sounds of her struggling with buttons and laces. The wind howled outside, but inside, the fire was beginning to warm the small space. "All right," she said finally. "You can turn around." Wade stood, turning to see her drowning in Mary's old work dress, the sleeves rolled up several times, the hem dragging the floor. She'd tried to tie her hair back, but wet strands escaped to frame her face. In the firelight, cleaned of dirt and desperation, she looked younger, vulnerable. "Thank you," she said simply. "For the clothes, for everything. I know they must have memories attached." "Everything has memories. Can't live your life avoiding them." Wade moved to the stove, setting water to boil. "You need food, real food, not just bread." "I don't want to take more from you than I already have." "Not taking, I'm offering." He pulled supplies from the shelves. Beans, salt pork, the last of his coffee. "Besides, cooking for two's not much different than cooking for one." She moved closer to the fire, holding her hands out to the warmth. "That man, Hartley, he's my cousin. My parents died when I was 17, left me in his care until I turned 21 or married." Wade didn't respond, just continued preparing the meal. Sometimes people needed to talk more than they needed answers. "He controlled my inheritance, said it was for my own good. Found me a husband, Mr. Aldrich. Owned mills in Philadelphia, 30 years older than me, with grown children who hated the idea of a young stepmother." She wrapped her arms around herself. "The pearls, the ring, they were left to me specifically, but Hartley said they were family property, that I was family property." "You're nobody's property," Wade said firmly. "Tell that to the law. A woman can't own anything without a man's permission, can't leave without being branded a thief or worse." Tears started falling again, but she wiped them away angrily. "I'm sorry. You don't need to hear this." "Maybe I do." Wade handed her a cup of coffee, black and bitter but hot. "Maybe that's why I was in town today, why I took that particular alley." She looked up at him, and for the first time since he'd found her, he saw hope in her eyes. "Do you believe in fate?" "I believe in choices." Wade said, "You chose to run, I chose to help. What comes next? We'll choose that too." Outside, the storm raged on, but inside the small cabin, 2 damaged souls found something they'd thought lost forever. A moment of peace, a spark of human kindness, and the possibility that tomorrow might be different from all the yesterdays that had brought them here. The morning brought a world transformed. Snow had buried everything familiar, leaving only white curves and gentle slopes where fences and landmarks used to be. Wade woke to find Margot already up, standing by the frosted window, wrapped in one of Mary's old quilts. "It's beautiful," she said without turning, "like the whole world's been made clean." Wade rose from his bedroll by the door, working the stiffness from his joints. He'd given her the cot, slept on the floor like he had during the war. Old habits died hard. "Beautiful and dangerous," he said, stoking the stove back to life. "That snow's hiding a lot of things that could kill you. Ice beneath drop-offs, places where the ground's not solid. She turned to him then, and he saw she'd been crying again. But these weren't the desperate tears of yesterday. These were something else. Grief, maybe, or relief. "I used to love snow in Philadelphia," she said, "would watch it fall from my bedroom window, see the carriages leaving tracks in the street. Everything seemed softer then, kinder." She pulled the quilt tighter. "Now I know better. Pretty things can be just as cruel as ugly ones." Wade set coffee to brewing, then joined her at the window. The storm had passed, leaving crystal clear air and a sun that made the snow sparkle like diamonds. "Your cousin," he said, "he strike you as the type to give up easy?" "No." The word came quick and hard. "Hartley never gives up when money's involved, or reputation. He'll tear this territory apart looking for me. Then we need to be smart." Wade moved to the table, gesturing for her to sit. "Tell me straight. Those jewels he says you stole. Where are they?" Margot sat slowly, her hands folded in her lap. For a moment, Wade thought she might lie, spin some story. Then she reached into the pocket of Mary's dress and pulled out a small cloth bundle. She unwrapped it carefully, revealing a string of pearls that caught the morning light like captured moonbeams, and a ruby ring that seemed to hold fire in its depths. "My grandmother came from Virginia," she said softly. "Old family, before the war took everything. These were all she had left to give my mother, and all my mother had to leave me." Hartley knew they were mine, but he also knew they were worth enough to pay off his gambling debts. Wade studied the jewels, then her face. "You could sell them, get far away, start fresh." "I tried." Her voice turned bitter. "First jeweler I went to recognized them from Hartley's description. He'd sent word ahead, claimed they were stolen. No one will buy them from me. There are ways around that. People who don't ask questions. And end up with half their worth, if I'm lucky." She shook her head. "These are all I have of my family. I won't let them go for pennies to some back alley fence." Wade poured coffee, thinking, the jewels complicated things. They were evidence of her supposed crime, but also her only security, a problem that needed solving. "Eat something," he said, setting beans and biscuit in front of her. "Can't think straight on an empty stomach." She ate slowly, savoring each bite like she had with the bread yesterday. Wade watched her, noting the careful manners beneath the desperation, the way she held her cup with both hands like a lady at tea. "You haven't asked," she said suddenly. "Asked what?" "Why I ran, really ran. Not just from Hartley or the marriage?" She set down her cup, meeting his eyes. "Most people would want to know what kind of woman abandons everything on her wedding day. I figure you had your reasons." "Mr. Aldrich seemed kind at first, courteous, brought me books, flowers, said I reminded him of his late wife." Her voice grew distant. "The night before the wedding, he came to discuss our future, told me exactly what he expected from a young wife, how I would dress, speak, behave, how many children I would give him, how I would submit to his guidance in all things." Wade's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. "He showed me the locked room in his house, where his first wife used to spend time when she needed correction. Still had her needlework on the walls, her Bible on the stand, like a shrine to his control." Margot's hands trembled around the cup. "That's when I knew I'd be her replacement in every way, including the locked room." "So you ran?" "That night, took only what was mine, left everything else. But Hartley couldn't let it go. The scandal, the embarrassment. He'd promised Aldrich a young, obedient wife and collected a hefty sum for arranging it." Wade stood abruptly, pacing to the window. The anger in his chest was familiar but unwelcome. He'd spent years learning to bury such feelings, to accept the world's cruelties without letting them poison him. But hearing her story, seeing her courage in running, it stirred things better left settled. "You can't stay here," he said finally. "This cabin's too close to town. Come spring, hunters use it. Someone would find you." "I know." Her voice was small, I don't know where to go. I have no money, no friends, nothing but the clothes you gave me. Wade turned back to her. Decision made. I have a place, my actual home, not this way station. It's deeper in the mountains, harder to reach. No one comes there. You'd take me there after knowing what trouble follows me. Trouble's been following me longer than you've been alive, Wade said. I'm not afraid of it. She stood, moving closer to him. In the morning light, he could see the bruises on her wrists where someone, Hartley Aldrich, had grabbed her too hard. The sight made his hands clench into fists. Why? She asked. Yesterday you said you knew what it was like to run. But this is more than that. This is harboring a fugitive. This is making yourself a target. Wade was quiet for a long moment, watching the snow through the window. When he spoke, his voice was rougher than usual. I had a wife once, Mary, good woman, kind heart, too kind for this hard land. He touched the frost on the glass, watching it melt under his fingertip. She took sick one winter. Doctor was in town, but the snow was bad. I went to fetch him, begged him to come. He was playing cards, winning, said he'd come when the game was done. Margot moved closer, not touching but present. Game lasted 3 days. By the time he came, she was gone, died calling for help I couldn't give. Wade's hand dropped from the window. I learned something then. When someone needs help, you give it. You don't wait, don't make excuses. You just help. I'm sorry, Margot whispered. Don't be sorry. Be ready. We leave in an hour. She nodded, then surprised him by touching his arm lightly. Wade, thank you, not just for the help, but for seeing me as a person worth helping. He looked down at her hand on his sleeve. Small, pale, but steady now, not trembling like before. Pack what food we have, he said, voice gruff. It's a day's ride if the weather holds. While she worked, Wade prepared his horse and checked his weapons. The Winchester was clean and loaded, his Colt .45 riding easy in its holster. He didn't expect trouble, but he'd learned to be ready for it anyway. Margot emerged wearing layers of Mary's clothes, a riding skirt over wool trousers, 2 shirts under the coat, the hat pulled low. She'd found Mary's old riding gloves, too big but serviceable. The wedding dress lay folded on the cot, abandoned like the life she'd fled. Leave it, Wade said, seeing her look back. Nothing good comes from carrying the past with you. She picked up the dress anyway, holding it for a moment. Then she walked to the stove and fed it to the flames, watching silk and lace turn to ash and smoke. Now I'm ready, she said. They rode out into the brilliant morning, Wade leading on foot while she rode the mare. The snow was deep but manageable if you knew where to step. Wade did, picking their path with the sure instinct of years spent reading the land. Tell me about your home, Margot said after they'd gone a mile in silence. It's not much. Bigger than the cabin. Built it myself after Mary died. Has what's needed. Good water, shelter from wind, game nearby. Do you ever get lonely? Wade glanced back at her. Lonely's just another word for peaceful, if you look at it right. I don't think that's true, she said quietly. I think lonely is when the silence gets so loud, you'd give anything for another voice, even an angry one. He didn't respond, but her words settled into him like splinters, working their way deep. They stopped at midday to rest the horse and eat. Wade built a small fire in the shelter of some rocks, melting snow for water. Margot sat close to the flames, the color finally returning to her cheeks. I've been thinking, she said, about what happens next. I can't impose on you forever. Didn't say forever, just until we figure something better. And if there isn't anything better, if Hartley keeps hunting, Wade fed another stick to the fire. Then we deal with that when it comes. Right now. Focus on today. Tomorrow's problems can wait for tomorrow. She smiled then, the first real smile he'd seen from her. It transformed her face. showing the woman she might have been in a kinder life. My mother used to say something similar. Sufficient unto the day is the evil thereof. Smart woman. She was. The smile faded. I wish she could have known I tried to be strong, that I didn't just accept what they planned for me. She knows, Wade said simply. Mothers always know. They pushed on through the afternoon, climbing higher into the mountains. The trees grew thicker, the path narrower. Twice Wade had to clear deadfall from the trail, working steady while Margot held the horse. As the sun began to sink toward the peaks, painting the snow pink and gold, Wade's cabin came into view. It sat in a natural hollow, protected by ridges on 3 sides, with a clear view of the approach. Smoke already rose from the chimney. Margot straightened in the saddle. Someone's there. Old Samuel, Choctaw fellow. Keeps an eye on things when I'm gone. Probably saw us coming an hour ago. Wade helped her down. Don't worry, Sam doesn't talk to anyone about anything. As if summoned. The cabin door opened. An elderly native man emerged, his face weathered as old leather, eyes sharp as a hawk's. He looked at Wade, then at Margot, then back at Wade. Brought company, he said, his voice carrying a hint of amusement. She needs shelter, Wade replied. Samuel nodded, as if that explained everything. Fixed stew, enough for 3. He disappeared back inside without another word. Margot looked at Wade uncertainly. He lives here. Comes and goes. Has his own place deeper in the mountains, but he prefers it here in winter. Warmer. Closer to game. And you trust him. Saved my life twice. I saved his once. That makes us even, which is the best foundation for trust. Inside, the cabin was warm and surprisingly comfortable. Larger than the way station, with 2 separate rooms and real furniture, a table and chairs, a proper bed, shelves lined with books and supplies. Samuel had indeed made stew, and the smell made Margot's stomach growl audibly. Sit, Samuel commanded, already ladling out bowls. Eat, then we talk. They ate in silence, the simple meal tasting like a feast after days of hardship. Wade watched Margot slowly relax, the warmth and food working their magic. Samuel said nothing, but Wade caught him studying her with those sharp eyes, reading her like others might read a book. When they finished, Samuel finally spoke. The lawmen came through yesterday, looking for a woman, offering money. Margot tensed, but Wade touched her hand lightly, and told them I saw nothing. Which was true. Samuel's eyes crinkled with humor. Cannot see what has not yet arrived. They say when they'd be back. Tomorrow, maybe after. They search the low places first. Think a city woman would stay near comfort. He looked directly at Margot. You are not what they expect. No, she agreed. I'm learning not to be. Samuel stood, gathering his few belongings. I go to my place now. Too crowded here, but he said it with warmth, not censure. At the door, he paused. The woman who runs is not fleeing something but running towards something. Remember that. Then he was gone, leaving them alone in the cabin that suddenly seemed both too large and too small. He's unusual, Margot said. Sam sees things different than most. Been helpful. Over the years. Wade moved to the shelf, pulling down a bottle and 2 glasses. Whiskey. I shouldn't. Probably not, but sometimes shouldn't is just another cage. He poured 2 measures, sliding one across to her. She took it, sipping carefully. The burn made her cough, but she smiled. My first whiskey. Hartley would be scandalized. Good, Wade said, raising his glass. To scandalized cousins and burned wedding dresses. And to unexpected kindness, she added, meeting his eyes. They drank, the whiskey warming them from inside as the fire warmed from without. Outside, night was falling over the mountains, bringing with it new snow and old dangers, But inside Wade's cabin, for this moment at least, two souls who'd been running finally found a place to rest. The fire had burned low when Wade heard Margot moving in the other room. 3 days had passed since he'd brought her to the cabin, 3 days of careful distance and polite conversation. She'd taken the bedroom while he slept by the main fire, maintaining proprieties neither of them had asked for, but both seemed to need. He rose quietly, adding wood to the stove, setting coffee to brew. Through the small window, he could see fresh snow had fallen in the night, covering their tracks and Samuel's both. Good. The harder they were to find, the better. "You're up early again," Margot said from the doorway. She'd wrapped herself in one of Mary's shawls, her hair hanging loose around her shoulders. In the dim morning light, she looked younger, softer. "Ranch habits," Wade replied, not turning from the stove. "Animals don't care if you're tired." "You don't have any animals here." "No, but habits die hard." She moved into the room, settling into what had become her chair by the fire. They'd fallen into rhythms already. Her chair, his chair, her cup, his cup. Small boundaries that made sharing space bearable. "I've been thinking," she said, watching the flames, "about what that man Samuel said, about running towards something instead of away." Wade poured coffee, setting her cup within reach. "And I don't know what I'm running toward. I only know what I left behind." She picked up the cup, cradling it between her palms. "That's not enough. Is it to sustain a life?" "It's a start," Wade said, settling into his own chair. "Sometimes you gotta get clear of what's hurting you before you can see what might heal you." They sat in companionable silence as the cabin warmed around them. Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the shutters. Wade made a mental note to check them later. Make sure everything was secure. "I should learn to be useful," Margot said suddenly. "If I'm to stay here for however long, I should contribute." "You don't need to." "Yes, I do." Her voice was firm. "I've been decorative my whole life, trained to pour tea and embroider cushions and make pleasant conversation. But out here, those things mean nothing. I need to learn real skills." Wade studied her over his coffee cup. There was determination in her eyes, the same fierce dignity he'd seen in the alley, but directed now toward something constructive. "What do you want to learn?" "Everything. How to cook on that stove, how to mend clothes properly, how to defend myself, if it comes to that." The last words hung between them, heavy with implication. Wade set down his cup, considering. "Come here," he said, standing and moving to the door. She followed, curious. Wade reached up to the shelf above the doorframe, taking down something wrapped in oilcloth. He unwrapped it carefully, revealing a small knife in a leather sheath. "This was Mary's," he said, holding it out. "She called it her insurance policy. Never had to use it, thank God, but she knew how." Margot took the knife, pulling it from the sheath. The blade was maybe 4 inches long, well maintained despite years of storage. The handle was carved bone, worn smooth from handling. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "Pretty's not the point. Useful is—" Wade took the knife back, demonstrating. "You don't fight with a blade this size. You survive with it. Quick strike to stop an attacker. Give you time to run. Here," he pointed to spots on his own body. "Soft targets, throat, belly, inside of the thigh. Don't go for the chest. Too many bones in the way." She watched intently, absorbing every word. "Show me how to hold it." Wade hesitated, then moved behind her, guiding her hand around the handle. "Firm grip, but not tight. Tight makes you slow. Blade up, like this. Strike and twist. Don't just stab." She practiced the motion, clumsy at first but improving. Wade stepped back, watching her repeat the movement over and over. There was something unsettling about teaching violence to someone who'd been sheltered from it. But the world didn't care about his discomfort. It would hurt her regardless if she wasn't prepared. "That's enough for now," he said after a while. "Keep the knife.
Wear it always.
Always.
Especially when you feel safe. That's when trouble likes to visit. She nodded, fastening the sheath to her belt. The weight of it seemed to give her comfort, or maybe just the knowledge that she wasn't helpless anymore. The rest of the morning passed in domestic tasks. Wade showed her how to bank the fire to last, how to judge the heat for cooking. She was a quick study, asking questions, making mistakes but learning from them. When she burned the biscuits, she laughed instead of crying, progress of a sort. After noon meal, Wade went out to check his trap lines, leaving her with a knife and instructions to bar the door behind him. The snow was deep but manageable, and he needed the movement, the solitude to think. Something was shifting in him, ice cracking around parts of his heart he'd thought frozen solid. 3 years of chosen loneliness had been disturbed by her presence, and he didn't know whether to embrace the thaw or shore up his defenses. When he returned at dusk, 2 rabbits over his shoulder, he found the cabin transformed. She'd cleaned everything that could be cleaned, reorganized the supplies, even mended a shirt he'd forgotten needed mending. But more than that, she'd made the place feel lived in rather than just occupied.
I hope you don't mind,
she said, suddenly shy.
I needed something to do with my hands.
It's fine, Wade said, though fine didn't capture the complexity of what he felt. The cabin looked like it had when Mary was alive, cared for, tended, loved. He dressed the rabbits outside while she prepared vegetables from his stores. They worked together preparing supper, moving around each other with growing ease. When they sat to eat, the silence was comfortable rather than strained.
I've been thinking about what comes next,
Margot said as they finished eating. I can't hide here forever, and you can't be expected to shelter a fugitive indefinitely. Already told you, I'm not worried about.
But I am.
She leaned forward, earnest.
Wade,
you've given me sanctuary when I needed it most, but I won't let my troubles become yours permanently. What are you thinking? The territorial judge in Cheyenne. I've heard he's fair, not easily bought. If I could get there, present my case, show the pearls are rightfully mine. That's 300 miles through winter mountains, and Hartley would have men watching the roads. Then I'll wait for spring.
And if Hartley finds you first?
She touched the knife at her belt.
Then I'll use what you taught me.
Wade pushed back from the table, pacing to the window. Full dark had fallen, but he could sense the weather changing. The wind had shifted, coming now from the north. More snow coming, probably by morning. There's another way, he said slowly, but you won't like it. Tell me. Make Hartley come to you, but on ground of your choosing, with witnesses he can't buy or intimidate.
How?
Wade turned from the window. Send word you're willing to negotiate. Say you'll return the jewelry in exchange for him dropping all charges, giving you a written release from any claim.
He'd never agree to that.
He would if he thought the alternative was losing everything. Right now, he's spending money searching, paying rewards, hiring men. Make him think you're ready to disappear completely unless he deals. Margot considered this, absently touching the pearls she still carried. And the witnesses. Samuel knows people, trappers, hunters, folks who live outside town law but have their own code. They'd come if asked. Make sure Hartley plays fair. Why would they do that for me? Not for you, for Sam, and for me, if I asked it. Wade returned to the table. But it's risky. Hartley might agree just to find you, then try to take you by force.
That's why you taught me the knife.
A knife's no good against guns, and Hartley strikes me as the type to bring plenty. She stood, moving to stand beside him at the window. Then what would you have me do, keep running hide forever? That's not a life. Wade, that's just another kind of death. He looked down at her, seeing the steel beneath the softness. She'd grown stronger in just these few days. Or maybe the strength had always been there, waiting for necessity to call it forth. If you do this, he said, I'll be there. Armed, ready. He tries anything. I'll stop him.
I can't ask that of you. You're not asking, I'm offering. She touched his arm, a gesture becoming familiar.
Why do you keep helping me?
Wade covered her hand with his, feeling the calluses already forming from work. Maybe because helping you helps me remember who I used to be. Before the war, before Mary died. When I believed in things like justice and protecting folks who needed it. And now I mostly believe in survival. But you make me think there might be more to life than just not dying. The wind gusted against the cabin, rattling the shutters he'd forgotten to check. Margot shivered, moving closer to him, not seeking anything beyond warmth, human comfort in the face of the storm.
I'll think on it, she said, about confronting Hartley. It's not a decision to make lightly.
No, it's not. They stood together at the window, watching snow begin to fall again. Wade was acutely aware of her presence, the way she fit naturally against his side, the faint scent of soap and wood smoke that clung to her hair.
Wade,
her voice was soft.
What was she like, Mary?
The question should have hurt, but somehow it didn't. Kind, gentle, saw the best in everyone, even when they didn't deserve it. She would have liked you. You think so? I know so. She always took the side of anyone running from something cruel. Said the world had enough hardness without people adding to it.
She sounds wonderful.
She was. Wade felt the familiar ache, but dulled now, bearable. Took me a long time to accept she was gone, longer to forgive myself for not saving her. That wasn't your fault. I know that now, but knowing and feeling are different things. Margot turned to face him fully.
Is that why you saved me? Because you couldn't save her?
Wade considered the question, owing her honesty. Maybe at first, but now it's because you deserve saving for your own sake. Because you're brave and determined and trying so hard to become who you're meant to be. Tears gathered in her eyes but didn't fall. I don't feel brave. Most days I'm terrified. Brave's not about not feeling scared. It's about acting despite the fear. And you've done that every day since you ran. She rose on her toes and kissed his cheek, soft and quick. Thank you for seeing me as more than a problem to be solved. Then she was gone, retreating to her room, leaving Wade standing alone with his hand pressed to his cheek like a green boy. The simple gesture had cracked something in him, letting light into places that had been dark too long. He spent the rest of the evening by the fire, cleaning his weapons and thinking, if Margot decided to face Hartley, he'd need to be ready. More than ready. He'd need to be willing to kill to protect her. The thought should have troubled him more than it did. When he finally bedded down by the fire, the wind had grown fierce, driving snow against the walls. But inside was warm and safe, and for the first time in 3 years, Wade didn't feel alone in the dark. In the other room, he could hear Margot moving, probably practicing with the knife again. The thought made him smile. She was becoming formidable in her quiet way. This runaway bride who'd stumbled into his life seeking bread and finding so much more. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Hartley was still hunting. The law was still against her. But tonight, they were safe in this cabin, protected by walls he'd built and weapons he'd taught her to use. Wade closed his eyes, listening to the storm. Whatever came next, he'd face it with her. Not because she needed protection, though she did, not because it eased his old guilt, though it might, but because somewhere between that alley and this moment, she'd become essential to him, like water in the desert, like fire in winter, necessary for more than mere survival. The knife had been meant for her protection, but perhaps, Wade thought as sleep finally took him, they were protecting each other now, from the cold, from the past, from the loneliness that could kill just as surely as any blade. The dawn came gray and bitter, with wind that cut through the thickest coat. Wade had been up for an hour, saddling both horses in the lean-to, checking weapons, preparing for what felt like inevitability. Inside the cabin, he could hear Margot moving about, her footsteps quick and purposeful. When he entered, she was dressed in Mary's riding clothes, her few possessions already packed. The pearls and ring were hidden in an inside pocket, close to her heart. She looked up at his entrance, and he saw his own grim determination reflected in her eyes. "You've decided," he said. It wasn't a question. "I can't keep hiding." She pulled on the gloves he'd given her, flexing her fingers. "Every day I stay here, I put you in more danger. Hartley won't stop, and eventually he'll find this place. Find you. I told you I'm not worried about—" "I know what you told me." She crossed to him, placing a hand on his chest. "But I'm worried. You've given me shelter, taught me strength, shown me kindness I didn't know existed. I won't repay that by bringing violence to your door." Wade covered her hand with his. "Where will you go?" "West, California, maybe, or Oregon, somewhere Hartley's reach doesn't extend." She tried to smile. "I'll find work. I can clean. Cook a little now. Thanks to you, maybe be a governess or companion to some rancher's wife." "With what money, how will you travel?" "I'll manage. I've learned I'm stronger than I knew." Wade turned away, frustrated. 3 days ago, he might have let her go, wished her luck and returned to his solitude. But 3 days had changed things. She'd awakened parts of him he'd thought dead, and the idea of her facing the frontier alone made his chest tight with fear. "There's another option," he said slowly. "We discussed this. I won't confront Hartley. It's too dangerous." "Not that." Wade faced her again. "Decision made. Come with me. Not running, not hiding, just traveling. Together." She stared at him. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I've got money saved. Enough to get us both somewhere far from here. You're right that this cabin's no permanent solution, but you don't have to face whatever comes next alone." "Wade." She shook her head. "You can't abandon your life for me. This is your home. This is a building." He gestured around the cabin. "Wood and stone. Mary made it a home, but she's gone. Has been for 3 years. All I've done since is exist here, going through motions, pretending that's living. And I've changed that. You've reminded me there's a difference between breathing and being alive." She turned away, wrapping her arms around herself. "People would talk, a man and woman traveling together, not married, not kin. My reputation—" "Your reputation's already ruined in Hartley's telling. Mine's nothing to speak of." Wade moved closer but didn't touch her. "I'm not asking for anything improper, just offering partnership, protection, a chance to find something better than what we're leaving behind." "And if I wanted more than partnership—" The words were barely audible, but Wade heard them clear as gunshots. "Then we'd face that when it came, same as any other bridge." She turned back to him, tears streaming down her face. "I don't want to run anymore. Wade, I'm so tired of being afraid." "Then don't run. Choose. Choose to leave because it's what you want, not because you're forced to." He wiped her tears with his thumb, gentle as he'd seen her handle the pearls. "Choose to let someone stand beside you instead of always standing alone." A sound outside made them both freeze horses approaching through the snow. Wade moved to the window, hand on his pistol. Through the frost-covered glass, he could see riders emerging from the tree line. 4 of them, moving careful but purposeful. "Get the rifle," he told Margot quietly. "It's loaded. You remember what I taught you?" She nodded, fetching the Winchester from its place by the door. Her hands were steady as she checked the chamber. No trace of panic in her movements. Wade studied the riders as they drew closer. Sheriff Brennan led them, Deputy Morris beside him. The third was Hartley. Wade recognized his city clothes and stiff posture. The fourth man he didn't know, but his tied-down guns marked him as hired muscle. "They found us," Margot whispered. Maybe just checking cabins." Wade pulled his coat on, settling his gun belt. "Stay inside. If shooting starts, bar the door and use the rifle. Don't let anyone in but me or Samuel." Wade, Promise me." "I promise, but don't let it come to shooting. Please." He squeezed her shoulder once, then stepped outside, closing the door firmly behind him. The riders had stopped 20 yards from the cabin, spread in a loose line. Professional. Ready. "Morning, Sheriff," Wade called, keeping his hands visible but ready. "Bit early for a social call." "Wade Carver," Brennan replied. "Heard you were back. This is Mr. Hartley from Philadelphia. He's looking for someone." Lots of people looking for things don't mean they find them. Hartley urged his horse forward a few steps. Up close, his face was pinched with cold and frustration. "Mr. Carver, I'm prepared to be reasonable. My cousin took items of significant value when she fled. Return them, and I'll see the charges reduced to a family matter." "Don't know your cousin. Can't help you." "Come now." Hartley's voice hardened. "You were seen in town with a woman matching her description. The baker, Paulson, was quite detailed in his account. Paulson sees what he wants when there's money involved." The hired gun spoke up. "No smoke without fire, friend. Lady's gotta be somewhere." Wade shifted slightly, hand drifting toward his pistol. "You'd be Buck Morrison. Heard of you. Thought you worked farther south." "I go where the pay is." Morrison smiled, cold as winter wind. "Right now, pay says find the lady." "Gentlemen," Sheriff Brennan intervened. "Let's keep this civil. Wade, if you've seen Miss Quinn, it'd be best for everyone if you said so. No one wants trouble here." "Seems to me trouble's already here, wearing a badge and bringing hired killers to my door." Morrison's hand twitched toward his gun, but Hartley raised a hand. "Mr. Carver, you seem like a practical man. I'm offering $500 for information leading to my cousin's return. Surely that's worth more than misplaced chivalry." "Your cousin," Wade said slowly. "Or your property." Hartley's face darkened. "She took what wasn't hers to take. Funny how men like you always think everything belongs to them. Women, jewels, other people's lives. Those jewels are family heirlooms. Were her mother's, left to her lawful, you just didn't like losing control of them. Or her." The door opened behind Wade. He tensed, ready to order Margot back inside, but she emerged with quiet dignity, the rifle held low but ready. "Hello, Hartley," she said, voice steady as mountain stone. All 4 men reacted, hands moving to weapons, horses shifting nervously. But Margot stood calm in the doorway, transformed from the desperate woman in the alley to something harder, stronger. "Margot," Hartley's voice held triumph and anger mixed. "Finally come to your senses." "I came to them the night I ran." She stepped beside Wade, close enough he could feel her trembling despite her steady voice. "I'm not going back. Hartley, not to you, not to Mr. Aldrich, not to that life." "You don't have a choice. You're a thief and a runaway. The law says those jewels are mine. Mother's will was clear. Whatever lies you've told." She reached into her coat, and every man tensed, but she pulled out only a letter, yellowed with age. Her last testament. "Would you like Sheriff Brennan to read it?" Brennan looked uncomfortable. "Miss Quinn, I've got papers from Mr. Hartley saying what he paid you to say," Margot interrupted. "We both know the truth. Sheriff, just like we know why Mr. Aldrich really wanted a young wife, and what happened to his first one." "Shut your mouth," Hartley snarled, civilized veneer cracking. "You know nothing." "I know about the locked room, about the corrections, about why she threw herself down those stairs rather than bear another—" "Enough." Hartley drew a small pistol from his coat. "You're coming with me, cousin, one way or another." Everything happened fast then. Wade's hand moved to his gun, but Morrison was faster. Clearing leather in a blink, the crack of a rifle split the air. Margot had fired, her shot taking Morrison's hat off, making him duck.
Wade drew and fired in one motion, his bullet striking Morrison's gun hand. The hired killer's weapon spun away into the snow. Deputy Morris went for his shotgun, but Wade's second shot convinced him to reconsider, hands rising away from weapons. "Everyone calm down," Brennan shouted. But his own gun was out now, wavering between Wade and Margot. Hartley still held his pistol, pointed at Margot. His hand shook with cold or rage or both. "You've ruined everything, the family name, the business arrangements, everything." "Good," Margot said simply. She worked the rifle's lever, chambering another round. "I hope Aldrich finds another victim. I hope everyone knows what you tried to sell me into. You were nothing before me. I gave you a home, position, prospects. You gave me a cage. Wade gave me a life." Something in those words broke Hartley's last control. He swung the pistol toward Wade, face twisted with hatred. "Him, this nobody, this is what you choose." Wade saw the decision in Hartley's eyes, saw his finger tighten on the trigger. There was no time to draw, no time to move, only time to step in front of Margot, to be the shield he'd promised to be. The gunshot was impossibly loud in the mountain air, but it was Hartley who cried out, his pistol spinning away as blood bloomed on his shoulder. Behind them, smoking rifle in hand, stood Samuel. The old Choctaw had appeared like a ghost, none of them hearing his approach through the snow. "Enough blood," Samuel said calmly. "This ends now." Hartley clutched his shoulder, face pale with pain and shock. Morrison cradled his wounded hand. The sheriff and deputy held very still, recognizing the futility of their position. "Miss Quinn," Samuel continued, "you wish to leave this place?" "Yes," Margot said firmly. "With Wade, if he'll have me." "Then go now, while these men consider their options." Wade didn't need more invitation. He helped Margot back inside, where they grabbed the packed supplies and what little mattered from the cabin. When they emerged, Samuel had collected the weapons from Hartley's group, standing guard with Wade's rifle. "This isn't over," Hartley gasped through his pain. "I'll find you. "No," Samuel cut him off. "You will go home. You will forget this woman. You will tell others she died in the mountains." He smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. "Or you will learn what happens to men who bring trouble to these sacred places." Wade saddled the horses quickly while Margot secured their supplies. As he helped her mount, she leaned close. "Did you mean it?" she whispered. "About going together?" "Every word." "Then let's go. West, like I said, somewhere new." They rode out together, leaving the cabin and its memories behind. Wade glanced back once to see Samuel still standing guard, the four intruders looking small and defeated in the snow. "Will they follow?" Margot asked. "No. Sam will make sure they understand the consequences. Hartley will nurse his wound and his pride, spin some story to save face. Morrison won't work for free, and Brennan's not stupid enough to pursue this into the territories." They rode in silence for a while, following trails Wade knew by heart. The sun broke through the clouds, turning the snow to diamonds and lighting their way forward. "I'm scared," Margot admitted as they paused at a ridge overlooking the valley below. "Of what's behind us. Of what's ahead. I've never been truly free before, never had to make my own way." Wade reached over, taking her gloved hand in his. "You won't be alone. We'll make our way together." "Partners?" she asked, echoing his earlier word. "To start," he agreed. "See where the trail leads after that." She squeezed his hand, then urged her horse forward. "California sounds warm. I'd like to be warm again." "California it is, then." They descended from the mountains together, two souls who'd found each other in the cold and chosen warmth. Behind them lay Hartley's threats and Brennan's law, abandoned cabins and old griefs. Ahead lay unknown country, challenges they'd faced together, and the possibility of a life neither had dared imagine alone. As they rode, Margot began to hum some half-remembered tune from her past life. transformed now into something hopeful. Wade found himself smiling, the expression foreign but welcome on his face. They'd started with bread offered to a starving woman. They'd continue with partnership offered freely, protection given and received. And perhaps, when the time was right, something deeper than either had thought to find again. The mountains gave way to foothills, foothills to plains. Somewhere out there, California waited with its promises of gold and sunshine and new beginnings. But for now, it was enough to ride together through the bright morning, leaving clear tracks in fresh snow, choosing the direction of their own lives at last. Spring came slowly to the mountain cabin, melting snow revealing the green beneath. 4 months had passed since the confrontation with Hartley. 4 months of building something neither Wade nor Margot had quite learned to name. They'd returned to the cabin after wintering in a valley town 40 miles west, far enough from Thistle Rock to avoid recognition but close enough to home when the weather cleared. Margot stood in the doorway, watching Wade repair the chicken coop that winter storms had damaged. She wore a simple calico dress she'd made herself, her hands now bearing the calluses of real work. The desperate bride from the alley seemed like someone from another lifetime. "You're staring again," Wade said without looking up from his hammering. "Just thinking." She stepped into the yard, carrying fresh water from the stream. "This time last year, I was learning to pour tea from silver services. Now I'm learning to tell when the bread's ready by how it sounds. Which is more useful? You know the answer to that." She set the water bucket down, stretching her back. "Though I still pour a fine cup of tea, if we had any china left unbroken." Wade straightened, studying her in the morning light. The sun had brought color to her cheeks, and work had given her a strength that went deeper than muscle. Any regrets? About China, none at all. About the rest of it, about not going to California. They'd meant to keep traveling west, had talked about it through the winter months. But when spring came and the passes cleared, neither had suggested leaving. The cabin had become home without them deciding it should. "Do you want to go?" Margot asked, not quite meeting his eyes. "I asked you first." She laughed, the sound carrying across the clearing. "We're both too careful sometimes, dancing around things instead of saying them plain." "Old habits," Wade agreed. "Speaking plain isn't something either of us learned young." "Then let me try." Margot moved closer, close enough to smell the wood shavings on his clothes. "I don't want to go to California. I want to stay here, in this cabin, with you. I want to plant a garden and raise chickens and learn to shoot better than passable." "That's pretty plain." "I'm not finished." She took his hands, rough now, with matching calluses. "I want to wake up knowing you're here. I want to fall asleep listening to you read. I want—" She stopped, color rising in her cheeks. "What?" Wade's voice was gentle. "What do you want?" "Margot, I want us to stop pretending we're just partners sharing a cabin out of convenience." Wade pulled her closer, one hand rising to cup her cheek. "We haven't been that for months now." "No," she agreed. "But we've been too careful to say so." "Maybe careful's not always wise." He leaned down, pressing his forehead to hers. "Maybe it's time to be brave instead." "I thought we were already brave. Running from passes, facing down hired guns." "That's one kind of brave. This is harder." Wade pulled back enough to meet her eyes. "Margot Quinn, would you consider making this arrangement more permanent?" "Are you asking what I think you're asking?" "Depends. What do you think I'm asking?" She swatted his chest lightly. "Wade Carver, after all we've been through, you're going to make me guess." "No." His voice turned serious. "I'm asking if you'd marry me. Legal and proper. Make this partnership something the law recognizes, even if we've recognized it ourselves for a while now." "Yes." The word came quick. "Sure. Yes, I'll marry you. Though Lord knows what name to use, since I'm fairly certain Margot Quinn is still wanted somewhere. We'll figure it out. Samuel knows a preacher who doesn't ask too many questions." She kissed him then,
soft and sweet in the morning sunshine. When they parted, both were smiling like young fools. "I should warn you," Margot said. "I don't have a wedding dress. Burned the last one, if you recall." "Good thing, too. That one came with too much baggage." Wade tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. "Besides, I prefer you in calico, or men's riding clothes, or—" Wade Carver, but she was laughing, the sound bright as birdsong. They spent the morning finishing chores, but everything felt different now. Each casual touch carried promise. Each shared glance held tomorrow in it. When Samuel arrived near noon, he took one look at them and shook his head. "Finally," he said. "Thought you two would dance around it till winter came again." "We've been that obvious?" Margot asked. "Only to anyone with eyes." Samuel dismounted, pulling supplies from his pack. "Brought news from town. Thought you'd want to hear." Wade tensed, hand moving instinctively toward where his gun usually hung. "Hartley. Dead." The word hung in the air like a stone. Margot gripped Wade's arm, her knuckles white. "How?" she whispered. "Shot in Philadelphia 2 months back. Business dispute. They say, seems he owed money to the wrong people. Made promises he couldn't keep." Samuel's expression was unreadable. "His estate's in chaos. No one's looking for runaway cousins anymore." Margot sagged against Wade. Relief and something else. Grief, maybe. For the man Hartley might have been, washing over her face. "Then I'm free," she said wonderingly. "Truly free. Free as anyone gets in this world." Samuel agreed. "Free to use your own name, if you choose. Free to go where you please." "I please to stay right here," Margot said firmly. "Though knowing I could leave makes the staying sweeter." Samuel smiled, the expression transforming his weathered face. "Figured as much. Brought something else." He pulled out a leather folder, handing it to Wade. "Deed transfer for the land. Officially yours now. Both names if you want." Wade opened the folder, staring at the papers. "Sam, this is your land, your father's land. Was, now it's yours. Gift for the wedding that's coming, willing or not. We can't accept. You can and will." Samuel's tone brooked no argument. "This place needs young people. Needs life and laughter and maybe children someday. I've got my own place deeper in. This is right." Margot hugged the old man, tears streaming down her face. "Thank you for everything. For being there that day with the guns. For—" "Hush now," Samuel said gruffly, though Wade could see he was pleased. "Just promise to invite me to the wedding feast." "You'll be the witness," Wade said, "if you're willing." "Honored to." They spent the afternoon planning. Samuel sharing news from the wider world while Margot cooked and Wade tended to evening chores. It felt domestic, settled in a way Wade hadn't experienced since Mary's death, but different too, where life with Mary had been gentle, like a creek running smooth. Life with Margot was like a river, sometimes rapid, sometimes deep, but always moving forward. That night, after Samuel had ridden back to his own cabin, Wade and Margot sat by the fire as had become their custom. But now she sat beside him rather than across, her head on his shoulder, his arm around her. "Tell me about the garden," Wade said. "The one you want to plant." "Vegetables first," she said dreamily. "Practical things, but flowers too, something beautiful for no reason but beauty. And herbs by the kitchen door, so I can reach them easy while cooking. We'll need to expand the cleared land. Maybe add another room to the cabin. Already planning additions." She tilted her head to look at him. "What aren't you telling me?" Wade Carver. "Nothing certain, just thinking ahead." He kissed her forehead. "Would another room be so bad?" "Not bad at all." She settled back against him. "I used to dream about children, back in Philadelphia, perfect little dolls and perfect little clothes. Now I dream about sturdy little ones who can milk goats and aren't afraid of mud." "That's a better dream." It's a more honest one. She was quiet for a moment. Do you think about Mary? About what she'd think of this? Wade considered the question. Sometimes, but I think she'd be glad. She always said the cabin was too quiet with just me in it. I would have liked to know her. You do, in a way. Every skill she taught me that I've taught you. Every improvement she made to this place that still stands. Wade stared into the fire. The dead don't leave us entirely. They just step back, make room for the living. That's beautiful. That's Samuel. He said it when Mary died, when I was drowning in grief. Didn't understand it then. And now I think love's not something that runs out. It just grows, makes room for more. He tightened his arm around her. Loving you doesn't mean loving Mary, Les. Just means my heart learned it could hold more than I thought. Margot turned in his arms, kissing him deep and sure. I love you too, in case that wasn't clear. It was, but it's good to hear the words. They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire die to embers. Outside, nightbirds called and wind stirred the pines. Inside, two people who'd found each other in the darkest winter looked forward to spring. We should set a date, Margot said eventually. For the wedding. Soon as Samuel's preacher can make it up here, unless you want something fancier. Lord, no, just us. Samuel, maybe a few of the mountain folk if they're willing. She yawned, the day catching up to her. Simple's better. We've both had enough of complicated. Amen to that. Wade banked the fire while Margot readied for bed. The routine of it, the simple domesticity, filled him with contentment. He'd thought such feelings lost with Mary, but here they were again, different in flavor but just as sweet. Wade, Margot called from the bedroom doorway. You don't have to sleep by the fire anymore, not if you don't want to. He looked at her standing there in her nightdress, hair loose around her shoulders, and felt his heart skip like a boy's. You sure? We're getting married. Seems foolish to keep pretending we're not already bound together. She smiled, shy but certain. Besides, the nights are still cold. Be warmer with two. Wade didn't need more invitation. He followed her into what had been her room, would be their room now. Another threshold crossed, another step toward the life they were building together. Later, lying together in the dark, Margot traced patterns on his chest. No regrets, she asked, echoing his question from the morning. None, Wade said firmly. Only that it took us so long to get here. Maybe we needed the time, needed to learn we could trust what we were feeling. Maybe. She pressed closer to him. But we're here now. That's what matters. That's what matters. Wade agreed, holding her tight. Outside, spring continued its work of renewal. Seeds long dormant stirred toward life. Ice that had seemed permanent melted away. And in a cabin built for solitude, two hearts that had been winterlocked discovered that spring could come to people too, bringing warmth and growth and the promise of harvest. They slept entwined, no longer running, no longer hiding, just two people who'd offered each other bread in a time of hunger and discovered that sometimes the smallest gestures lead to the greatest gifts. In the morning, they'd rise and work side by side, building their life with their own hands. But for now, they rested in the peace they'd earned. Partners in truth, soon to be married in law, already joined in every way that mattered. The cabin that had sheltered one broken heart now held two healing ones, and the future stretched before them green and growing as the mountain spring. The fever came in the night like a thief, stealing Margot's strength before Wade even knew danger had entered their home. He woke to her thrashing beside him, skin burning hot, words tumbling incoherent from her lips. Margot. He lit the lamp with shaking hands, the yellow glow revealing her flushed face, hair plastered to her forehead with sweat. Margot, can you hear me? Her eyes opened but didn't focus. Mother, is that you? I can't find my gloves. Wade's heart clenched. He'd seen fever before, had lost Mary to it, but this was different. Sudden, violent, consuming. He pressed a hand to her forehead and jerked back from the heat. "Stay with me," he whispered, though she was already gone somewhere he couldn't follow. "I'm going to help you." He worked through the darkness, everything Mary had taught him about healing coming back. Cool cloths for the fever, willow bark tea if he could get her to swallow it, keeping her warm despite the heat burning through her. His hands moved steady, but his mind raced with panic. By dawn, Margot's fever had climbed higher. She alternated between violent shivering and burning heat, sometimes crying out names he didn't recognize, sometimes clutching at him with desperate strength. "Don't let them lock the door," she pleaded, eyes wild. "Please, I'll be good. Don't lock me in." "No one's locking anything," Wade soothed, understanding she was reliving Philadelphia, Aldrich's house, the room that would have been her prison. "You're safe. You're free." He needed help. Samuel would know healing plants. Might have medicine Wade didn't, but leaving her alone was unthinkable. He compromised by firing 3 shots from the porch, the mountain signal for trouble. Samuel would hear if he was within miles. The morning crawled by in a haze of cold cloths and whispered prayers Wade hadn't said since Mary died. Margot's breathing grew labored, rattling in her chest. He held her through the convulsions, talked to her though she couldn't hear, promised things he had no power to deliver. "We're supposed to get married," he told her, voice breaking. "Remember simple ceremony, just us and Samuel. You wanted flowers by the door." She muttered something about pearls, fingers clutching at her throat where they weren't. Near noon, Samuel arrived, taking in the situation with one glance. He moved to Margot's side, checking her pulse, looking at her eyes, feeling the heat of her skin. "How long?" he asked. "Since midnight, maybe before. I should have noticed sooner." "Stop that. Fever like this comes fast." Samuel opened his pack, pulling out pouches of dried herbs. "Get water boiling. We'll try everything." They worked together through the afternoon, brewing teas, applying poultices, fighting an enemy they couldn't see. Margot drifted between delirium and unconsciousness, her body battlefield to a war they could only watch. "Tell me about her people," Samuel said as they worked. "Sometimes blood tells us how to heal." "Her mother died young, lung weakness. She said father too, but earlier." Samuel nodded grimly. "Weak lungs breed weak lungs. This fever settled there, in her chest." "Mary died of fever." The words came out raw. I can't do this again, Sam." "Then don't." The old man gripped Wade's shoulder. "This isn't Mary. This is Margot. Different person, different fight. She's strong in ways Mary wasn't." Mary was strong. Mary was gentle, accepted what came. This one, Samuel gestured to Margot, who even in delirium had her jaw set stubborn. "This one fights. Question is, will you fight with her?" Wade looked at the woman who'd walked into his life seeking bread and stayed to remake his world. Samuel was right. Where Mary had been acceptance, Margot was defiance. She'd run from a life that would have killed her slower, but just as sure. She wouldn't give up now. "What do you need me to do?" Samuel smiled grim. "Talk to her. Keep her anchored here. Fever wants to take her spirit wandering. Your voice can hold her to this world." So Wade talked. He told her about the day they met, how she'd looked like a snow angel in that alley, fierce and fragile all at once. He described their journey to the cabin, her learning to shoot, the way she laughed when the biscuits burned. He painted word pictures of the garden she wanted, the flowers that would bloom, the life they'd planned. "Don't you leave me," he said, voice hoarse from talking. "You hear me, Margot? You don't get to walk into my life, make me love you, then leave. That's not the deal." Night fell again. Samuel had done all his herbs could do. Now it was waiting. Wade refused to move from her side, holding her hand, talking until his throat was raw. Sometimes she seemed to hear, her fingers would tighten on his, or she'd turn toward his voice. But mostly she was gone, fighting battles in places he couldn't reach. Near midnight, her breathing changed. The rattle deepened, spaces between breaths growing longer. Wade knew that sound, had heard it from Mary at the end. "No," he said firmly. "No, you don't get to do this." He pulled her up against him, holding her so she could breathe easier. She was so light, all the weight she'd gained through winter sweated away by fever. He pressed his face to her hair, feeling her heartbeat flutter against his chest. "I never told you about the poems," he said, desperate for words that might reach her. "Mary had this book, leather-bound, full of verses. I kept it but never read it after she died. Too painful. But last week, while you were mending, I opened it again." Margot's breathing hitched, steadied slightly. There was one she'd marked, about love being stronger than death, water that many floods cannot drown. I didn't understand then. Thought it meant holding on to grief. He stroked her hair, gentle as if she might break. "But that's not it. It means love changes form but doesn't die. Means the heart learns new shapes but keeps its nature." A tear slipped down his cheek, landing on her fevered skin. "My heart learned your shape. Margot, made room for you without losing what came before. Don't make me learn another grief. Stay." The night wore on. Samuel dozed in the chair, worn from his efforts. Wade held Margot, rocking slightly, humming songs half-remembered from childhood. Her fever raged on, but something in her breathing eased. The rattle quieted. The spaces between breaths grew regular instead of frightening. Dawn came pale through the windows. Wade had dozed, exhaustion finally claiming him. He woke to find Margot's eyes open, focused on his face. The fever had broken, leaving her soaked but clear-eyed. "Wade," her voice was barely a whisper. "You look terrible." He laughed, or maybe sobbed, pulling her closer. "You've looked better yourself." "Was I sick?" She frowned, trying to remember. "I dreamed strange things. Mother was there, and locked rooms. But then you were talking about poems and gardens, and I followed your voice back. Don't ever scare me like that again." "I'll try not to." She touched his face, feeling the stubble of 2 days without shaving. "You stayed with me." "Where else would I be? Some men would have fetched a doctor and left, propriety and all." "To hell with propriety. You're going to be my wife, in sickness and health. Remember, we haven't said the vows yet." "Then we'd better hurry up and say them, before you find another way to nearly leave me." She smiled weakly. "Not leaving, too much to stay for." Samuel woke then, checking Margot with gentle hands. "Fever's broken clean. You'll be weak for days, maybe weeks, but you'll mend." "Thank you," Margot said. "Both of you. I know what could have happened without—" "Hush," Samuel interrupted. "No looking at might-have-beens. Look forward instead. Plenty of life ahead to focus on." He left medicines and instructions, promising to send word to his preacher friend. "Let her get strong first, then we'll see about that wedding." After Samuel left, Wade helped Margot drink some broth, then settled her back in bed. She was already drifting toward healing sleep when she spoke again. "Wade, what you said about the poems, about love changing shape, that was beautiful." "It was true." "I know. That's what made it beautiful." She squeezed his hand. "I love you too, in case the fever made me forget to say it. Rest now. I'll be here when you wake." "I know," she murmured, already fading. "You always are." Wade watched her sleep, feeling the echo of old grief alongside new relief. He'd come so close to losing again, to having his heart shaped by another absence. But Margot had fought, had chosen to stay, had followed his voice back from wherever fever had taken her. He thought about Mary's poem, about love that many waters couldn't drown. She had been right in her gentle wisdom. Love did persist,
did change shape without losing its essence. His love for Mary had become a quiet warmth that made loving Margot possible. And this new love, tested by fear and strengthened by surviving it, would shape whatever came next. The sun climbed higher, filling the cabin with light. Outside, birds sang morning songs and life went on. Inside, Wade kept watch over the woman who taught him that hearts could expand, that running toward something was better than running away, that sometimes the greatest courage was simply choosing to stay. Margot slept peacefully now, the fever's false flush replaced by honest pallor that would bloom again to health. Her breathing came easy. No more rattles or catches. She'd won her battle. But more than that, she'd won it by holding to what anchored her here, to him, to their plans, to the life they were building board by board and season by season. Wade finally let exhaustion take him, stretching out beside her on top of the quilts. His last thought before sleep was a prayer of gratitude, not to any particular god, but to whatever force had brought them together, had let them keep each other, had given them this second chance at life and love. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Margot would need careful tending as she healed. The garden would need planting. The cabin would need readying for the summer and the wedding and whatever came after. But tonight, they were together, alive, committed to facing whatever came as they'd faced everything else, side by side, anchored in love that had proved stronger than fear, fever, or flight. The lamp burned low as they slept. Two souls who'd found in each other not just love, but home. The kind you build with your own hands and guard with your whole heart. The kind worth fighting through any fever to keep. The rider appeared at sunset, when the light turned the mountains gold and Wade was chopping wood for the evening fire. Margot saw him first from where she sat on the porch, still weak from her illness, but growing stronger each day. "Wade," she called softly, hand moving to the rifle they kept by the door. He turned, axe still in hand, following her gaze down the trail. A lone horseman approached at an easy pace, too confident for someone with ill intent, but too purposeful to be a casual traveler. "Get inside," Wade said quietly. "No." Margot stood, steadying herself against the doorframe. "I'm through hiding." As the rider drew closer, Wade recognized him. A bounty hunter called Mason Parks, known for always getting his quarry. The man reined up just outside comfortable shooting distance, hands visible, showing he'd come to talk. "Wade Carver," Parks called out. "Mind if I water my horse?" "Truff is there," Wade replied, not lowering the axe. "State your business while he drinks." Parks dismounted slow and careful, letting his horse drink while he studied the cabin, Margot and Wade with calculating eyes. "Looking for someone. Thought you might have seen her." "Lots of people looking for lots of someones," Wade said. "Doesn't mean they're here." "True enough." Parks pulled out a folded paper, worn from travel. "Woman named Margot Quinn, runaway bride from Philadelphia. There's still paper on her, though the man who posted it is dead." Margot stepped forward, chin raised. "Then why are you looking?" Parks studied her with professional interest. "Because the reward's still valid. Transferred to the estate. $500 is $500. "Blood money," Margot said coldly. "All money's got blood on it, one way or another." Parks folded the paper, tucking it away. "Question is, what's it worth to you for me to forget I found you?" Wade's grip tightened on the axe. "You threatening us?" "Negotiating," Parks corrected. "See, I could ride back to town, send word to Philadelphia, collect my reward nice and legal, or—" He let the word hang. "Or," Margot prompted, "or I could remember wrong. Could say I tracked the woman to California. Heard she died of fever on the coast. Tragic story. Worth maybe $200 for my trouble." "We don't have $200, Wade said flatly. "Then what do you have?" Margot disappeared into the cabin before Wade could stop her.
She emerged carrying the cloth bundle he knew contained her pearls and ruby ring. Park's eyes lit with interest. "Don't," Wade warned her. "It's all right." She unwrapped the jewels, holding them up so they caught the dying light. "These are what started everything. My inheritance, my mother's legacy, worth far more than your reward." "Margot." "I'm tired of running. Wade, tired of looking over my shoulder." She faced Park squarely. "Take them. Tell whatever story you want. Just leave us in peace." Parks dismounted fully, approaching slow. He took the pearls, running them through his fingers, then examined the ring with an appraising eye. "These real? As real as my mother's death that left them to me." The bounty hunter considered, then shook his head, handing them back. Margot stared, confused. "Keep them," Parks said. "I got a better idea." Wade stepped between them. "We're not interested in your ideas." "You should be." Parks moved back to his horse, pulling something from his saddlebags. "Because I didn't come here for the bounty. I came here with a message." He produced an envelope, sealed with black wax. "From a law firm in Philadelphia. Seems Hartley Quinn died with debts bigger than his estate. Everything's being sold off. But there was a will, an old one, from your parents, Miss Quinn, sealed away where Hartley couldn't destroy it." Margot's hands trembled as she took the envelope. "My parents' will. Lawyer named Morrison found it cleaning out Hartley's safe. You're named sole inheritor of your mother's personal effects and a trust fund Hartley couldn't touch. Been gathering interest for 8 years. I don't understand," Wade said. "If you're not here for the bounty, Morrison hired me to find her, make sure she got what was hers." Parks grinned. "Pays better than bounties, and it's cleaner work. The reward offer's already been withdrawn. I just wanted to see what you do when threatened." Margot sank onto the porch step, letter clutched in her hands. "It's real." "Real as those pearls. There's forms to sign, procedures to follow. But Morrison says there's enough to live comfortable, if you're careful." Parks mounted his horse. "I'll tell him you're alive. Married name of Carver, living in Wyoming territory. He'll send the proper papers." "Why?" Margot asked. "Why would this Morrison help me?" "Said he knew your mother. Said he'd promised her once to look after you if anything happened." Parks tipped his hat. "World's full of surprises. Miss Quinn. Sometimes they're even good ones." He rode off as darkness fell, leaving Wade and Margot alone on the porch. She still held the letter, afraid to open it, afraid it might disappear like a dream. "It could be a trick," Wade said gently. "No." She broke the seal, reading by the light spilling from the cabin. "This is my mother's lawyer's hand. I remember it from when I was young." Tears started falling as she read. "Oh, Wade, she tried to protect me, set aside money where Hartley couldn't touch it. She knew what he was, tried to shield me." Wade sat beside her, arm around her shoulders as she read passages aloud. The trust wasn't a fortune, but it was enough. Enough to improve the cabin, buy livestock, weather bad years. Enough to remove the constant fear of want that shadowed frontier life. "You could go back," Wade said quietly. "With Hartley dead and money of your own. You could return to Philadelphia, live the life you were meant to." Margot set the letter aside, turning to face him. "Wade Carver, are you trying to get rid of me?" "I'm saying you have choices now, real choices, not just staying because you've nowhere else to go." "I have always had choices." She took his face in her hands. "I chose to run. I chose to trust you. I chose to stay. I choose to marry you. None of that had anything to do with money or lack of it. But the life I was meant to live," she laughed, the sound mixing tears and joy. "I'm living it, right here, with you. In this cabin we've made a home. What would I want with Philadelphia society? They'd expect me to pour tea and pretend I never learned to shoot a rifle or birth a calf or love a man who saved me with bread and kindness." Wade kissed her then, long and deep, tasting tears and truth and tomorrow on her lips. When they parted, both were smiling. "So we're still getting married?" he asked. "Try to stop me." She gathered up the letter and jewels. "Though now I can afford a new dress for it." "I like the idea of you in calico." "Then calico it is, my choice. Remember?" They went inside together, discussing plans with new possibility. The money would help. Certainly, they could build the extra room Wade had mentioned, buy good breeding stock, maybe even glass windows to replace the shutters. But the core of their life wouldn't change. They'd still work side by side, still face whatever came together, still choose each other every morning. Later, as they prepared for bed, Margot paused by the window. "That bounty hunter Parks, he was testing us." "Testing what?" "Whether we'd betray each other for safety, whether we'd sell out for money." She smiled. "We passed. Did we? You were ready to give him your jewels." "To protect us, to protect our life here." She came to him, wrapping her arms around his waist. "Those pearls mean nothing compared to what we've built." "Your mother's legacy." "My mother's legacy was trying to protect me, to give me choices. She succeeded. I chose you. I chose this." She rose on her toes to kiss him. "That's worth more than all the pearls in the ocean." That night, they lay together planning not escape, but expansion. The garden Margot wanted would be bigger now, with fruit trees maybe. The chicken coop could become a proper barn. They could help Samuel when his old bones complained. Hire the young couple down mountain for harvest time. "We could even take in someone who needs it," Margot said sleepily. "The way you took me in, pay forward the kindness." Already thinking of good works. Thinking of full circles, of bread offered when someone's hungry, of shelter given freely. She yawned. "Besides, this cabin's too big for just 2 people. Wade pulled her closer, understanding what she wasn't quite saying. "Is it now? Will be, eventually, when the time's right." She was already drifting toward sleep. "Life has a way of expanding to fill the space you give it." He lay awake longer, marveling at the turns life could take. A year ago he'd been alone, frozen in grief and habit. Now he had Margot beside him, recovery behind them, and possibility ahead. The money from Philadelphia would ease their way, but it hadn't changed their essential truth. They'd chosen each other when they had nothing, would continue choosing each other now that they had enough. The cabin settled around them with comfortable creaks and sighs. Outside, night creatures called to their mates and wind sang through the pines. Inside, 2 people who'd learned that love could grow in the hardest ground slept peacefully, no longer running from the past but building toward the future. In the morning, they'd send word to town about the wedding, start making plans for improvements to their land. But tonight, they simply held each other, grateful for bounty hunters who weren't what they seemed, for mothers who planned ahead, for choices freely made and freely kept. The letter from Philadelphia lay on the table, official seals and legal language promising security. But the real security slept in their bed, 2 hearts that had chosen each other without promise of reward. 2 souls that had found home not in a place, but in a person. Wade's last thought before sleep was of the garden Margot would plant, of seeds that would grow into plenty. They'd started with nothing but hunger and kindness, and look where it had led. Now, with resources to match their determination, there was no limit to what they might grow together. The fire burned low, casting dancing shadows on the walls. In its light, the cabin looked like what it had become, not a hiding place but a beginning, not a shelter from the storm, but a foundation for whatever weather might come. They'd face it together, as they'd faced everything else, with choices freely made and love freely given. The trouble started with whispers at the general store. Wade noticed it first, the way conversations stopped when he entered, the careful distance people kept. After 3 weeks of this, he confronted Morrison directly. "Something you want to say?" "Morrison." The shopkeeper shifted nervously. "It's not me, Wade. You know I don't hold with gossip. But folks are talking. About her, about both of you. Morrison glanced around, lowering his voice. Someone's been spreading stories. Says she's still wanted back east. Says you're harboring a criminal. Wade's jaw tightened. Hartley's dead. The bounty's withdrawn. I know that. You know that. But whoever's talking is making it sound different. Morrison hesitated. There's worse. They're saying she bewitched you. That no decent woman would choose to live alone with a man in the mountains. That she's not proper. Wade's hand moved instinctively toward his gun, then stopped. Violence wouldn't solve this. Who's spreading these lies? Can't say for certain. Stories just appeared, like smoke. Morrison looked genuinely distressed. Wade, I've known you since you came here. Know you're a good man. But this talk, it's poisoning the well. Folks are choosing sides. Wade left with his supplies, mind churning. He'd thought Margot safe now, free to build their life without shadows. But someone wanted to destroy that peace. When he reached home, he found Margot in the garden, tending the young plants she'd started. She looked up at his approach, smile fading as she saw his expression. What happened? He told her, watching her face pale, then flush with anger. So we're back to running back to hiding? No. Wade set down the supplies. Taking her dirt-stained hands in his, we're going to town, together. This Saturday. Wade. They want to spread lies in darkness. We'll stand in the light. Let them say their poison to our faces. Saturday came bright and clear. Margot dressed carefully in her best calico, the one she'd made herself with fabric from her trust money. Wade wore his cleanest shirt, gun prominent on his hip. They rode into Thistle Rock side by side, heads high. The town square was busy with market day. Conversations faltered as they passed, eyes following their progress. Wade helped Margot dismount at the central hitching post, where everyone could see. Mrs. Henderson. Margot called out pleasantly to the banker's wife. How lovely your roses are doing. The cutting you gave me is thriving. Mrs. Henderson, caught off guard by the direct address, mumbled something about mountain air being good for plants. They made their rounds deliberately, purchasing supplies they didn't strictly need, greeting everyone by name, refusing to act like outcasts. Some people responded with cautious warmth. Others turned away, but the very act of normalcy seemed to diffuse some tension. Then she appeared, Catherine Paulson, the baker's daughter, pretty in a sharp way, with calculating eyes and a smile that never reached them. She'd set her cap at Wade years ago, before Mary even, and had never forgiven his lack of interest. Why, Mr. Carver, she said loudly, ensuring everyone heard, and your companion, how brave of you to show your faces. Miss Paulson, Wade replied evenly. I believe you know my fiancée, Miss Quinn. Is that what she's calling herself? Catherine's voice dripped false concern. I heard such troubling things from my cousin in Philadelphia, about theft, about scandals, about a woman who'd do anything to escape justice. Margot stepped forward, and Wade saw she was smiling. Not the forced smile of politeness, but the genuine smile of someone who'd found something amusing. You must mean your cousin Mr. Aldrich, Margot said clearly, voice carrying across the square. The mill owner, the one whose first wife died so tragically, falling downstairs in a locked room. Catherine's face went white. You can't prove... Prove what? Margot asked innocently. I'm merely expressing condolences. Such a tragedy when a woman dies trying to escape, when she's so desperate to get away from someone that even stairs seem like freedom. The square had gone silent, everyone listening now. Of course, Margot continued. I'm sure your cousin has changed. I'm sure he doesn't still have that room, doesn't still believe wives need correction. I'm sure you'd never help him find another young woman to... Stop! Catherine's composure cracked. You know nothing. I know enough. Margot's voice turned steel. I know you've been spreading poison because Wade chose me over you. I know you wrote to Aldrich, hoping he'd come collect what he thought he'd bought. I know you're so eaten with jealousy you'd help a monster if it meant hurting us. Wade watched with something like awe as Margot faced down her accuser. This wasn't the desperate woman from the alley. This was someone who'd found her strength and wasn't afraid to use it. Tell me, Miss Paulson, Margot said. What did Aldrich promise you, money, or just the satisfaction of seeing Wade available again? Catherine drew herself up, trying to reclaim dignity. I was trying to protect this town from a criminal. The only criminal here, a new voice interrupted, is whoever's bearing false witness. Everyone turned. Reverend Thomas stood at the edge of the crowd, his quiet authority commanding attention. Beside him stood several others, Mrs. Henderson, surprisingly, and the doctor who'd been too late for Mary, and Samuel, who rarely came to town. I've had letters from Philadelphia, the Reverend continued, from a lawyer named Morrison and a minister named Davies, both confirming that Miss Quinn is innocent of any crime, that she fled an illegal imprisonment, not justice. Furthermore, Dr. Mills stepped forward. I've heard from colleagues back east about Aldrich, about wives who suffer accidents, about young women who enter his house whole and leave broken. If Miss Quinn fled such a fate, she showed wisdom, not criminality. And Mrs. Henderson added, voice shaking but determined. I know what it's like to be young and trapped, to have choices made for you by men who see you as property. She looked directly at Margot. You did what I wished I'd been brave enough to do. The tide was turning. Wade could feel it in the shift of the crowd, the way eyes moved from Catherine to Margot with new understanding. But Catherine wasn't finished. She still lived with him unmarried, still took his protection without... Without what? Samuel spoke for the first time, his voice carrying the weight of mountains. Without the blessing of people like you, she was starving. He fed her. She was freezing. He sheltered her. Where in your Bible does it say kindness requires permission? Where were you, Miss Paulson? Margot asked quietly. When I was behind your father's shop, eating from bins. Where was your Christian charity then? Catherine had no answer. The crowd began to disperse, some stopping to speak to Margot and Wade, offering awkward apologies or simple nods of acknowledgement. As they prepared to leave, Sheriff Brennan approached. Miss Quinn, Carver, I owe you an apology. I let myself be led by lies and rewards instead of looking for truth. You were doing your job, Wade said. No, my job is protecting folks, not hunting them. Brennan touched his hat to Margot. You need anything, you let me know. This town owes you better than it gave. They rode home in companionable silence, the morning's confrontation settling into something like peace. As the cabin came into view, Margot finally spoke. Did you know about Catherine? Suspected. She was always bitter about Mary. Figured she'd be worse about you. Why didn't you tell me? Wade considered. Because you needed to face her yourself. Needed the town to see you stand up, speak truth. I could have protected you, but I needed to protect myself. Margot smiled. You're learning, Wade Carver, learning I'm not made of spun glass. Never thought you were... Glass doesn't survive what you have. That evening, as they sat by the fire, a rider approached. They tensed, then relaxed as Reverend Thomas came into the light. Sorry to intrude, he said, accepting the coffee Margot offered. Wanted to speak with you both. About what happened today. If you've come to lecture about propriety, Wade began. I've come to apologize, and to ask a favor. The Reverend looked tired but determined. This town's sickness isn't new. Catherine's just a symptom. We've gotten comfortable with our judgments, our assumptions, forgotten what grace looks like. What kind of favor? Margot asked. I'd like to marry you. Publicly, big ceremony. Whole town invited.
Not because you need proving, but because the town needs reminding. About love that doesn't follow rules. About courage that looks different than we expect. Wade and Margot exchanged glances. They'd planned a quiet ceremony with just Samuel. This would be different. "Give us time to think," Margot requested. "Of course, but don't take too long. Summer's coming, and there's nothing like a wedding to heal a community's heart." After he left, they sat in silence, digesting the day's events. "Finally," Margot laughed, soft and wondering. "What?" Wade asked. "A year ago, I was running from one wedding. Now I'm being asked to have a big one to save a town's soul." She shook her head. "Life has a strange sense of humor." "We don't have to do it. We don't owe this town anything." "No," Margot agreed. "We don't, but maybe that's exactly why we should. Because grace given freely is the only kind worth having." Wade pulled her close, marveling again at her strength. She'd faced down her accuser, won over doubters, and now was considering a public wedding not for her sake but for others. "You sure you're the same woman I found behind that bakery?" "No," she said simply. "That woman was running away. This one's running toward you, toward our life, toward whatever comes next." She tilted her face up to his. "So, Wade Carver, will you marry me in front of the whole town? Show them what choosing love looks like." "I'd marry you in front of the whole world if you asked." "Just the town will do." She kissed him softly. "Though fair warning, I plan to wear my mother's pearls. Let Catherine choke on the sight of them." Wade laughed. The sound rich in the quiet cabin. They'd faced down gossip and lies, turned accusers into allies, been offered a chance to transform judgment into celebration. Not bad for a Saturday's work. The fire crackled as they planned. Voices mixing with the night sounds outside. A public wedding would be a statement that love didn't always follow expected paths, that grace could bloom in unlikely soil, that sometimes the best response to poison was refusing to drink it. Summer was coming, and with it, new challenges and possibilities. But tonight, they were together, stronger for having stood in the light and spoken truth. The woman who'd once hidden in shadows had faced down her demons in the town square. The man who'd chosen isolation had stood publicly with his choice. Tomorrow would bring wedding plans and community healing and all the complexities of life lived openly. But tonight was theirs, earned through courage and kept through grace, in a cabin built by sorrow and rebuilt by hope. Two hearts that had found each other in winter darkness looked forward to summer sun. The ancient oak stood sentinel at the edge of their property, its branches spread wide like arms welcoming visitors. Wade had built a simple bench beneath it 3 summers ago, but today it served a higher purpose. White ribbons fluttered from the branches, and wildflowers gathered by Margot's careful hands decorated the space where they would speak their vows. The morning of their wedding dawned clear and bright. Wade stood by the window, watching the sun paint the mountains gold. When Margot emerged from their bedroom, she wore a simple dress of cream-colored cotton, made by her own hands. With her grandmother's pearls gleaming at her throat, the ruby ring caught fire in the morning light. "You're not supposed to see me before the ceremony," she said, but she was smiling. Too late for superstitions. Wade crossed to her, taking her hands. "You're beautiful." "You're biased." "Completely," he agreed. "Been that way since you apologized for being hungry." They'd chosen to marry here, at their home, rather than in town. Reverend Thomas had understood. The public statement had been made when they stood together in the square. This ceremony was for them, for the life they'd built, witnessed by those who truly mattered. Samuel arrived first, dressed in his finest clothes, carrying a wrapped bundle. "Wedding gift," he said gruffly, handing it to Margot. Inside was a blanket, woven with patterns that seemed to dance in the light. "Was my mother's, for new beginnings." Margot hugged him, tears already threatening. "It's perfect." Others came throughout the morning, the young couple from down mountain, the doctor who'd spoken for them, Mrs.
Henderson with her quiet dignity, even Morrison from the store, bringing his wife and a ham for the feast. Not the whole town, but enough, the ones who saw them truly. As the sun reached its peak, they gathered beneath the oak. Reverend Thomas stood ready, Bible in hand but speaking from the heart. Wade and Margot faced each other, hands joined, while their small community formed a circle around them. "We're here," the Reverend began, "to witness something that's already true. These two souls have chosen each other through trial and hardship, through fear and fever, through the judgment of others and the grace of understanding. We're not making them one today. They've done that themselves. We're simply celebrating what love has already accomplished." Wade spoke his vows first, voice steady despite the emotion threatening to overwhelm him. "Margot Quinn, you came into my life seeking bread and gave me purpose. You were starving, and somehow you fed my soul. I promise to stand beside you in plenty and in want, in sickness and in health. In the face of any storm that comes, you are my choice, today and always." Margot's eyes shimmered with tears, but her voice was clear. "Wade Carver, you offered kindness when the world showed cruelty. You gave me shelter not just from the cold, but from despair. You taught me I was worth saving. Then let me save myself. I promise to choose you every morning, to build our life with joy and courage, to love you not in spite of our strange beginning, but because of it." "The rings?" Reverend Thomas asked. Wade produced two simple bands, gold worn smooth, purchased with the first money from Margot's trust. They'd discussed fancier options, but both preferred these honest circles, unadorned except by the promise they represented. "With this ring," Wade said, sliding the band onto Margot's finger, "I give you my heart, my home, my future." "With this ring," Margot echoed, her hand steady on his weathered fingers. "I give you my trust, my strength, my forever." "Then by the power vested in me by God and the Wyoming Territory." Reverend Thomas smiled. "I pronounce you husband and wife. Wade, you may kiss your bride." Their kiss was soft, sweet, a promise sealed. Around them, their friends cheered and clapped. Somewhere in the trees, birds added their songs to the celebration. The feast that followed was simple but abundant. Tables made from boards and sawhorses groaned under the weight of shared food. Stories were told. Laughter rang across the meadow. And if a few tears were shed, they were the good kind. As evening approached and guests began to leave, each stopped to offer personal congratulations. "Mrs." Henderson pressed a small envelope into Margot's hands. "Recipes," she whispered, "including how to make bread that'll keep through winter. Every wife needs good recipes." Morrison shook Wade's hand firmly. "You did right by her, both in the saving and in the marrying. Town needs more men like you." Even Catherine Paulson had sent a gift, a set of dishes with a note of apology. "Seems she's learning," Margot mused, reading the card. "Maybe there's hope for her yet." When the last guest had gone and they'd cleaned up the remnants of celebration, Wade and Margot sat together on the bench beneath the oak. The wedding dress had been replaced by her everyday calico, his good shirt exchanged for comfortable wool, but the rings on their fingers caught the dying light. "How does it feel?" Wade asked. "Being Margot Carver?" "Like coming home," she said simply, "like the name I was always meant to have." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the sun paint the mountains purple and gold. The cabin stood ready behind them, expanded now, with the extra room they'd added and glass windows that caught the light. The garden spread before them, promising harvest. In the barn, animals settled for the night, adding their sounds to the symphony of evening. "I want to add something to the house," Margot said suddenly. "More rooms? We've barely finished the last one." "Not a room, a sign." She turned to face him. "Remember what you said that first night about bread offered freely? I want a sign by our door. Where bread was offered, a family was born." Wade's throat tightened. "You remembered that?" I remember everything about those first days. How you saw me as human when others saw only scandal. How you offered help without condition. She leaned against his shoulder. That's the legacy I want our children to know. That kindness creates families. That love grows from the smallest gestures. Children, Wade's voice was carefully neutral. Eventually, when the time's right. She placed her hand over her still flat stomach. Though time might be deciding for us. Wade stared at her. Understanding dawning. Margot, are you... Too early to be certain, but I think so. She smiled at his expression. Spring babies are good luck, Samuel says, and this one will be born to parents properly wed, in a home built by love, surrounded by a community that fought to understand instead of judge. Wade pulled her close, marveling at how life kept expanding, from a lonely cabin to a full home, from isolation to community, from one broken heart to two healing ones creating something new. I love you, he said, words that had once come hard now flowing easy as water. I love you too. She tilted her face up for a kiss. Thank you for the bread that started everything. As full dark fell, they made their way inside. The cabin that had sheltered Wade's grief now housed their joy. The table where he'd eaten alone now bore evidence of feast and friendship. The walls that had echoed with silence now held laughter and promises of more to come. Wade carved the sign that night while Margot watched, her hand occasionally drifting to her stomach in wonder. The letters came out strong and clear. Where bread was offered, a family was born. They hung it by the door the next morning, visible to any who approached. A statement and a promise that this home would offer what Wade had offered Margot that winter day. Sustenance for body and soul, shelter without judgment, the chance to transform hunger into hope. Years would pass. The child Margot carried would be born safe and strong, followed by others. The cabin would expand again, filled with young voices and running feet. The garden would grow, feeding not just their family but neighbors in need. The sign by the door would weather but never fade, its message as true decades later as the day it was hung. But that was all to come. Tonight, Wade and Margot Carver lay in their bed as husband and wife, listening to night sounds and making quiet plans. They'd traveled far from that frozen alley, not in miles, but in spirit. Two souls who'd been running had learned to stand. Two hearts frozen by loss had thawed into new love. The moon rose full, silvering the mountains and meadow. In its light, their small homestead looked like what it was, a place where broken things came to heal, where strangers became family, where bread offered in kindness grew into a feast of belonging. And in a cabin built by one love and renewed by another, two people who'd found each other in the darkness rested in the light they'd created together. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges and chances, but tonight was for celebrating the journey from that first offered loaf to this abundance of joy. The sign by the door creaked gently in the night breeze, its carved words catching moonlight. Where bread was offered, a family was born. Simple words for a profound truth, that kindness, freely given, creates more than it knows. That love, bravely chosen, transforms everything it touches, that sometimes the smallest gestures become the greatest gifts. In the years to come, many would read those words. Some would understand immediately. Others would need the story explained, but all would be welcome. All would find what Wade had first offered Margot: sustenance without condition, shelter without judgment, the chance to choose their own becoming. The circle was complete but ever widening, from one act of mercy to a lifetime of grace, from a desperate woman and a lonely man to a family that would bless generations. All because on a winter day in 1878, a cowboy chose compassion over comfort, and a runaway bride chose to trust a stranger's kindness. The mountains stood eternal witness. The oak tree spread its sheltering arms, and in a cabin where love had learned to live again, two hearts beat as one, grateful for bread, for courage, for each other.
for the future they'd build with their own hands and hearts. Thank you for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. Please share in the comments below so we can connect and share our thoughts together. If you enjoyed this tale from the Old West, please subscribe to Wild West Stories 1850 and hit the like button. And don't forget to press the hype button to help more people discover this story. Your support means everything.